Bonjour, mon frères. I have no idea what I just said. I think it's like French and German, maybe. As you can see, I am outdoors. I don't know how well you can see me. Right now the sun is threatening to blind everything in existence over on this side of the deck. So I've moved my camera over here, and I can't really see myself in the little view thing on the camera. So I hope you can see me. I hope this isn't going to be a video where you can hear me, but you can't really see me. Anyway, I am the Comics Kid 2099, and I am here to talk to you about
Missed Opportunities.
This is going to be a video where I talk about something that was done in a comic book. Sometimes it might be a movie or a TV show, but in this case I'm going to talk about something in a comic book that I think should have been done wildly differently. If you remember last year, I did a couple of videos called Not Like This. Not Like This! Where I talked about some movies and how I thought they should have been done differently. And basically this is kind of sort of going to be like that. I can hear a jet ski or something, I don't know, it's really loud. We'll just wait until it's gone and then I'll get back to talking. It's an airplane, I see it. Okay, I can't really hear it anymore. So, what is today's missed opportunity? About a year ago, it was revealed that Nick Fury in the Marvel mainstream comics actually had an African-American son who he had fathered some 30 or 40 years in the past. Now, for those of you who are maybe a little bit confused, let me quickly reveal to you the Cliff Notes version of Nick Fury. He was created in the 1960s, and he was appearing in two comic books simultaneously. One was Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos. This was set in World War II. In the 1960s, this wasn't that big of a deal. We had Fury in the 60s, who was in his 50s or something, and then we had Sergeant Fury set in the 40s, and he was in his 30s, so it kind of worked. And then the other comic was Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., which was actually half of a comic book. The other half was shared either with the Human Torch or with Doctor Strange. It was an anthology-type series, sort of. And basically, Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. was kind of cashing in on the secret agent spy-fi fiction of the day. So in the 1960s, you had James Bond, you had The Man from U.N.C.L.E., you had the British television series The Avengers, not to be confused with the comic book The Avengers. And so Nick Fury, in a way, was basically just Stan Lee's way of trying to cash in on two very popular genres. War stories and kind of a science fiction spy thriller type thing. And now, Nick Fury is mostly known as the spy, although in a post-9/11 world, instead of being kind of the groovy James Bond Man from U.N.C.L.E. type figure, he's more of a John McClane / Tom Clancy type spy. More hard, definitely more of a militaristic bent to it, which, you know, it's not bad, but it's just an entirely different thing. Anyway, as the years passed, it became clear that, well, Nick Fury's not really getting older. In fact, none of the comic book characters are really getting older. Eventually, it was settled that Marvel Comics did not happen in real time. You had characters who had been around for 30 years, but they were not in their 60s at this point. So even though Cyclops and Iceman and the rest of the original X-Men were teenagers when they were first introduced in X-Men issue 1 in 1963, 10, 20 years later, they weren't middle-aged. They were still just a few years older. They were maybe college-age by the time you got to the early 80s. And so, Nick Fury, he's kind of problematic because, you see, when you have someone like the Fantastic Four, they were first introduced in 1961. But there wasn't anything really that was tying them to 1961 specifically. It's not like the first issue of Fantastic Four has the team trying to prevent the assassination of John F. Kennedy or something like that. And so, Marvel Comics kind of adapted a sliding time scale. So, characters like the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, the X-Men, Daredevil, these guys have all been around for about 10 years. So, from Fantastic Four issue 1 all the way up to the present day, all of that 50 years of comic book history has taken place over the span of about 10 years. However, you have characters like Captain America and Nick Fury. Those characters are specifically tied to an event, and they are not easily removed from that event. You can't just say Captain America was fighting in World War II, but now he's kind of been fighting in the Vietnam era. This kind of changes the character dramatically if you do that. So instead, with Captain America, nature does not want me to film this video. Captain America, he was in suspended animation for 20 years. Now he's been in suspended animation for more like 60 years. And Nick Fury, since he was never in suspended animation, they quickly came up with an idea where he takes a formula called the Infinity Formula. And this basically keeps him young forever. So you can still have Nick Fury's past as a soldier in World War II, and then you can also have 60 years of Nick Fury stories. And if you want to say, this is a story that Nick Fury did something in the 1970s, then you can go ahead and do that. So that's basically the history of Nick Fury. It took a little longer than I thought. Flash forward to the early 2000s. We're talking 2000, 2001. There's a brand new separate universe that Marvel Comics is doing. Everything prior to now has all been set in one fictional world. So Spider-Man can meet the Fantastic Four, he can meet Iron Man, etc. Now, you've got this separate universe called the Ultimate Universe. You've got Ultimate X-Men, Ultimate Spider-Man, and the Ultimates, which is basically like a harder, edgier version of the Avengers. And in this world, Nick Fury is meant to visually look like Samuel L. Jackson. Now you might be saying, hold on a second, Samuel L. Jackson did play Nick Fury in the Avengers movies. That is correct. It's a weird thing where long before there was an Avengers movie, they were drawing Ultimate Nick Fury to look like Samuel L. Jackson, and then somebody on high said, well, what if we actually got Samuel L. Jackson to play Nick Fury? He seemed to think that that was an okay idea, and so here we are with Ultimate Nick Fury looking like Samuel L. Jackson, movie Nick Fury being played by Samuel L. Jackson, and in the original comics you've got a white guy who plays Nick Fury. Now, Marvel apparently thought that this was going to be extremely confusing for all of the two people who went to see the Avengers movie and then decided to go and start reading comic books. I'm being just a hair sarcastic here. Unfortunately, even if the Avengers movie took in $36 kabillion, it is not going to bring 36 kabillion people to go and read comic books after they go and watch the Avengers movie. That's just never going to happen. However, Marvel seems to think that that is going to happen. And so, they don't want to do something very simple like, say, in the movies he's black, in the comics he's white. Instead, they try to then take the original comics where Nick Fury is a white guy, and they try to change it so that it matches the movies. In this case, they try to change it by saying that the original white Nick Fury slept with a black woman, and then she had his son who he didn't know about for 30 or 40 years. And then, somehow, Nick Fury runs out of his Infinity Formula. I'm not exactly sure how this works, if it was always a limited supply and he was always going to run out, or if somebody, like, took all of it and, like, threw it away. I don't know. But from what I understand, old white Nick Fury is now old and white. And I don't think he's really doing anything much in the comics. However, I have been told that he's currently being used in the Age of Ultron comics, so I don't know. Anyway, about a year ago, keep in mind this was just mere months after the release of the Avengers movie, we have a new character, Nick Fury Jr., and he also is missing an eye. What are the odds? I've seen more than a few people make the suggestion that it's hereditary, that anyone in the Fury family is missing an eye, and I think that's very funny. Now, here's where my problems lie. Apparently, Nick Fury Jr. is just immediately in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the new Marvel Comics universe. And now he's just like basically old Nick Fury, except that his skin color is different. Honestly, I don't really have a problem with them introducing Nick Fury's illegitimate son. They did this exact same thing in the very late 80s, early 90s when they introduced his son, Scorpio 2. But the problem is, they're not even trying to introduce a new character. They're trying to create a character who is exactly the same as the original Nick Fury, but he looks different. This guy, he has the same personality as old Nick Fury. He basically acts like Nick Fury. That's why he's missing an eye. That's why he's in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. They didn't want to do an interesting story. They wanted to just replace the old guy with somebody who looks like Samuel L. Jackson. So where's the missed opportunity here? Well, in my opinion, it's really easy. They could have introduced Nick Fury's son, and then he could be this guy who he doesn't really like his father because his father was never really there for him. But he has this same kind of love for his country. He feels duty bound to protect the innocent, stuff like that, and so he joins S.H.I.E.L.D. But you've still got old Nick Fury who's in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. and he wants to form this connection with this son that he never knew he had, but his son is resilient to the idea because, well, Fury was never there for him. And so you've got this young Nick Fury who's probably like a private or something like that in S.H.I.E.L.D. Whatever their ranking system is, he's very low on the totem pole. He is not in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. right when we first introduce him. And then, instead of just immediately taking Fury Jr. and promoting him to become head of S.H.I.E.L.D., you could do this slow progression of stories where Fury Jr. slowly realizes that he has more in common with his father than he thought. And then eventually he could rise in the ranks. And he would be this kind of guy who's like, I don't want to ride on the coattails of my father. If I'm going to be promoted, I want it to be because of my own actions. And then you could have people like Dum Dum Dugan, who is saying things like, yeah, he's just like his father, but he doesn't want to admit it. And eventually you can slowly phase out old white Nick Fury if the whole end game is to replace him with a guy who looks exactly like Samuel L. Jackson. You can still do that, I guess, but you need to do it with a story that makes sense. It does not make sense to introduce this character and in the blink of an eye, suddenly he is Nick Fury Sr. verbatim, except that his skin is a little darker. Now, I may get a few comments on this video that say things like, "You don't know anything about comics, that's not what happened." Okay, fair enough. I don't really read a whole lot of new comic books. I'm busy reading older things, and I eventually get to the new stuff whenever the new stuff becomes the old stuff. But everything that I've seen about Nick Fury Jr. and Nick Fury Sr. seems to indicate that what I've said is basically what happened. And that's why I thought I'd make this video roughly a year after the fact. So I'm curious what you guys think. Is this idea okay as it was presented, or is my idea something interesting that could have worked better than what we got? If you have other ideas, other solutions to this Nick Fury Jr. thing, I'd love to see them in the comments below or a video response. And until then, just remember, at the YMCA, you can have a good meal. You can have a good time. I'll see you next time.